Afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilliga here with your tropical update for September 11th of 2018, brought to you by the good folks at Tropical Pool and Spa. And, well, we're in the peak of hurricane season. As you can see here, September 10th is the official peak of the season. So the day after, we're sitting here and well, it makes sense that there's a lot to talk about right now in the tropics with a handful of storms out there. We've got 3 named storms and 1 invest to talk about. The reason that it's the peak is because this is when the water temperature is maybe not at its hottest, but it's been at its warmest for an extended period of time. You've got mid-80s out here all the way out into the open Atlantic. You've got mid to upper 80s across parts of the Gulf of Mexico and down into the Caribbean as well. And here's your named storms: Florence, Isaac, Helene, and then back over here we've got Invest 95L. We're going to start here first with a 50 to 70% chance of development as this rides to the northwest. Notice that we do have a little front over here, which is going to help us out a little bit in terms of slowing this thing down before it gets moving, and it's also going to tend to kind of rip it apart too a little bit. But the tail end of this front and then this little invest as they kind of meet, where we're going to end up in a situation where we're probably going to see a tropical depression out of this. We'll see if we get any more than that. And then out into the open Atlantic, Florence back in behind me here, Isaac and Helene out here all rolling across the Atlantic at the same time. We're going to start with Florence because this is kind of the newish or new stuff. So wind only, and I use that term loosely, 130 miles an hour down a little bit, gusting to 160, 370 miles off to the south-southwest of Bermuda. Your pressure right now at 950 millibars, anticipated to drop as we head through the next couple of days as it rides to the northwest. Category 4, Category 4, Category 4. The hope is that it's a 3. But again, that doesn't change much in terms of the overall impacts, as we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. The big thing is this cone has shifted just barely back to the southwest. A lot of the afternoon modeling data and mid-morning and midday modeling data has come back and kind of shifted the overall track to the south. I mean, just a skosh, just a little bit. And the one thing that is noted on here is that it doesn't move much once it gets ashore either. And as we'll see here in a second, anticipating a lot of rain with that. For Tropical Storm Isaac, wind at 70 miles an hour, gusting to 85 as this thing continues to trek to the west. The thought is it'll be a Category 1 hurricane again before falling back into just a tropical storm. The thought is perhaps as we get into the Caribbean before it runs into some shear, it may re-strengthen again before re-weakening. But it's probably going to run right around 65 to 75 mile an hour wind through the next 3 to 5 days. Now, once it gets beyond that and maybe out toward Jamaica, that's when things are going to get a little more questionable. The cone gets a little wider in here, and as we'll see again here in a couple of seconds, the models do start to diverge quite a bit. Helene, well, there's a pretty decent cone with this one. They're feeling pretty good that this thing's going to slide off to the north and not really bother anybody. Wind at 110, gusting to 130 out here, about 670 miles off to the west of the Cabo Verde Islands. This one with pressure at 966. Again, staying out to sea, not bothering anyone. Helene goes down in the record books in 2018 as generally a fish storm. We have another wave back in behind that, kind of right in here, that's going to be coming off the coast, but then there's a break back in behind that. We've been waffling back and forth the last couple of days in terms of what these waves are going to do out here, and finally I think we're starting to get some clarity on what's coming in terms of one wave, then maybe another one, and then that may be it. With the high-res futurecast, we're going to talk about Florence for a hot second here because I know that's what a lot of you folks are concerned about, questioning, just curious, just generally curious about what's going on with this thing. Here's our high-res futurecast, which by Thursday morning at 8:30 puts it just off the coast of Charleston and just off to the south of Wilmington, and takes it a little bit closer Thursday afternoon, with landfall most likely happening late Thursday, early Friday. Here's your most likely onset of tropical storm force winds. Here's Thursday at 8 a.m. Here's Thursday at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Florence for tropical storm force wind. That's not hurricane wind, that's tropical storm force wind. Percent probability that you deal with tropical storm force wind across parts of the Carolinas as of right now. This is the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. This isn't model data, suggesting an 80 to 90 to 95% chance that you deal with tropical storm force winds across coastal North Carolina. A little bit lower as you head into parts of South Carolina and Georgia. And still a 40 to 50% chance that you deal with tropical storm force winds across parts of southern Virginia. The reason is because as these storms move ashore, the wind field spreads out. So you end up with a strong center, a strong nucleus of hurricane force, and in this situation, Category 3 and Category 4 force wind, that moves ashore and that spreads out as it weakens. And so instead of a really tightly wound up area of 130-mile-an-hour wind, maybe you've got a wider berth of 70-mile-an-hour wind, which would be tropical storm force wind, which would apparently get as far off to the north as maybe D.C. Kind of incredible. Hurricane force wind, well, this only goes out to Saturday at 8 o'clock in the morning, but a 30 to 40 to 30% chance along the coast. As far north as Norfolk and Richmond with a 3 to 6% chance, and down off to the south toward Charleston, a 4% chance, and Myrtle Beach an 18% chance. So a non-zero threat from basically Richmond to Charleston still, which is pretty incredible where this Category 3 storm, the Category 4 storm that's out there. I will say the rainfall is the thing that meteorologists are also concerned about. FEMA's been talking about this. The National Hurricane Center has been talking about this. There's a situation where you may end up with incredible storm surge along the coast, incredible winds along the coast, and then as you move inland Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday, you end up with a lot of rain, not only along the coast, but also inland, and maybe in places which are removed from the center. So people get always caught up, well, where's the center of the storm going? Well, it could be somewhere in North and South Carolina between about Wilmington and Charleston, and they sure see 15 to 30 inches of rain according to this one model. But there are other places out there that are not where the center of the storm is that are going to end up with 3 to 6 inches of rain. That does include Boone, North Carolina, where Appalachian State is, and that's where Southern Miss is going to be playing on Saturday. So they could see 3 to 6 inches of rain. Okay, well, that's just the European model's suggestion about what's going to happen. It's just one model, but nevertheless, that's a lot of rain. And so that's one reason that we're so concerned about what Florence is going to do. All right, back to the storm that a lot of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and even Florida Panhandle and Texas folks probably care about, and that's Isaac out here, which by Friday morning at 9 a.m. slides into the Caribbean. A lot of these lines are pretty close together, too, which is good. We've got model consensus in here that by the time we get to Friday, we're going to be just off to the south of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti, in the Caribbean, in the open waters. The good news is there's going to be a little bit of shear out there. By the time we get towards Saturday, we're still in roughly the same area. So we're feeling pretty good about what the models are saying. It's beyond this point that there's a little more uncertainty that gets into the forecast. And you're probably going to see some of these lines that drift into the Gulf of Mexico and go whichever direction. Please know that as we head through the next couple of days, we are getting to the point where some of these, what we call deterministic models, can spit out what it thinks the hurricane, the tropical storm, the tropical depression, whatever it is, it can spit out what it thinks it's going to look like. And we get new data out from these things about every 6 hours. And it says, okay, well, I think it's going to be right here or right there. Every 6 hours, it comes out with new data. And you end up playing whack-a-mole with some of these models that maybe aren't the best at figuring out what tropical storms are going to do. A perfect example of that is the CMC. This is the Canadian model. And how many tropical storms and hurricanes does Canada get? Not many. But they still kick out a model that tracks what tropical systems are going to do. It's not necessarily great at doing it, but it does it. It's going to say it's here today, and in 6 hours from right now, it's going to say it's here, and then maybe it says it's back down here, and then the next day it's over here, and 12 hours later it's back over here. And you're just, it's whack-a-mole. So try not to get too caught up. You're probably going to see some scary pictures out there on social media of some big, gigantic hurricane sitting on the coast of Mississippi for whatever reason. That is not number one, set in stone, but number two, going to be the same case 6 hours later, or on a different model. Now, you can look at a different one and say, okay, well, what's the tab S saying? What's the tab M saying? So don't get too caught up on specifics. What I usually do with these, and what I would recommend you do at home, when you see something scary like that, try and find these spaghetti plots. Well, where are they generally? I say, well, yeah, generally, we're kind of in this ballpark here. So that's where I'm going to look for it to be, kind of somewhere in here. And I know folks saying, well, specifically, what is going to happen? We don't know, unfortunately, at this time. It's too far into the future. So what I like to do specifically is you look at this tab S, and then you find the tab M model, and that's the shallow and the medium. And that is a good fence to build yourself about where this thing's going to be by Tuesday in the afternoon. Somewhere in here. What happens after that, well, we'll talk about that in a second. And 95L is generally a Texas storm. Here's the tab S, the D, the M. So everything kind of says it's going over here. Here's the climatological one. Don't worry about that. And the OCD, I'm not worried about that one either. All right. 700 millibar moisture, 850 vorticity map. There's Florence, there's Isaac, there's Helene. And then we got 95L right there. 95L, again, drifting northwest is going to be a Texas problem, mainly for them, rain and a little wind, maybe some waves. But not terrible, not like Florence is going to be for the Carolinas and Georgia. We'll continue to track Isaac as it enters into the Caribbean. Notice how it kind of falls apart in here, and even that next wave kind of falls apart, and then we start to deal with a lot of dry air across parts of the Atlantic, and it hopefully turns it off for a while and allows all of us to kind of recover from what's happening right now. The reason, by the way, the upper level wind shear here, the reason why we have Isaac moving into the Caribbean and falling apart, we got some shear out ahead of this thing and back in behind it, and it runs into some of this shear and just basically goes kaput, according to our European model here. We can compare that back to the American model, the GFS, and we can say the GFS in red, Euro in yellow. Florence right on top of each other. Notice the difference for Isaac here, one versus the other. As this enters into the Caribbean, the American running a little slower, a little behind the European in terms of the overall forward speed by Friday afternoon for Isaac. But watch what happens. European says, gone by the time we get towards Saturday. Let me go back here. By the time we get to Saturday, this thing kind of falls apart. There's Friday into Saturday. It starts to kind of fall apart and sag a little to the south. The GFS kind of takes it back off to the northwest before it has it falling apart as well. So beyond that, what are we looking at? Well, for that, we have to look into the upper levels for what's going on. And I'm going to run this thing all the way through Wednesday, Thursday of next week, when we would be talking about the opportunity for Isaac or whatever's out there to drift our direction. With the American, it slides an area of high pressure off the east coast. High pressure goes clockwise like this, which means whatever's down here may get pulled to the northwest a little bit easier. Does that mean it's definitely coming to Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana? No. But it does unfortunately open the door for it to slide into the Gulf of Mexico, which is why I've been paying very close attention to Isaac over the last couple of days, because that's what we've been kind of seeing in the overall trend for models, is that generally we're going to end up with high pressure back in behind Florence off or near the east coast, opening the door for whatever's out there to move off to the northwest and toward us. Because if Isaac is out here, there's Cuba, there's the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. If you've got high pressure to the north, it can't move directly north toward that high pressure. It kind of has to ride around it to go poleward, and so that pulls it into the Gulf of Mexico, which is why we've been watching, again, that pretty closely over the last couple of days. So that's a look at the tropical update brought to you by the good folks at the Tropical Pool and Spa for September 11th of 2018. I know there's a lot of stuff going on out there, so hopefully this answered a lot of your questions. And of course, if you still have questions, you can always find me on Facebook.